So moving on, thank you so much, David. We're going to move on now to another area of game monetization entirely. So we're now going to talk about hybrid monetization. In this context, we're talking around subscription and battle passes, these sort of longer term models, I believe, although I think Nick is going to tell me more about that. Nick Murray, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad at all. I think you've got your panelists joining you. So rather than me kind of steal your thunder, as I always try to do, for once I'm going to step back and let you take over. Nick, over to you.
Much appreciated. So yeah, as the panelists join, I'll just say we are talking hybrid monetization. We are talking about subscriptions, battle passes. We're talking about how to deal with monetization at different stages of a game. And yeah, I think a good starting point would be for everyone to introduce themselves. So I will kick off. I'm Nick. I work as a freelance games consultant for product monetization, game design, etc. And I'm also head of games for Carry First, a publisher in Africa. Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Daniel McLaren. I am the senior product manager for Stoic. We built the game Banner Saga, and we have a new project in the works. My background is largely all live operations, everything from MMOs to mobile games. I've pretty much seen and done it all in live mobile.
Very cool. Sarah, how about you next?
Hi, yes, I'm Sarah Tilley. I'm the Monetization Live Ops Director at DPS Games, which is the UK studio for Wargaming. Like Daniel, I've worked in a lot of MMOs and touched on mobile from time to time, mostly working in the free-to-play space, but also working with a number of hybridized games as well, and taking subscription games to free-to-play. Yeah.
Great. Jonathan, over to you.
Hey guys, Jonathan Lynn over at StatementGames out of New York. I'm a co-founder and advisor consultant. StatementGames is a free-to-play daily fantasy sports platform. And I've spent my career kind of in telecom, in mobile apps, in software development, and it's great to be here today. Thanks.
Cool. And lastly, Antanina.
Hello, everyone. I'm a product manager at Activision, and I'm managing planning and implementation team within Call of Duty Mobile live operations. And as a team lead, I'm driving the performance of our game and overseeing day-to-day operations. So nice to be here.
Very cool. So thank you, everyone. I think we have a really diverse panel here. So in terms of the experiences you have, in terms of the insights you can bring to what is also quite a broad topic. So to kick things off, my first question would be, to what extent does your game genre influence the monetization model or strategy you put behind it? And I'm opening this up to whoever wants to jump in first.
I'll jump on it. So for me, one of the things that I'm finding really interesting as I move back to PC and console is that mobile's done kind of this really interesting job of saying, hey, we'll monetize, you know, effectively one of two ways. Hey, what has everybody else done? What do we see is working really well? Cool, we'll just continue to follow that model, but also opening up the opportunity to have a little bit more flexibility. So I worked on Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, and at first we pretty much kind of followed the quintessential gacha monetization, but as we started looking at the data and seeing what our players are doing and what they were engaged with, we were able to adopt our monetization model, leaning more into live events and monetizing characters in a bit more of a unique way than it had been done prior. And so that's kind of something I really want to pull into PC and console that's not being done. So I think genre does have a definition. Like, it's easier to go like, hey, I monetize characters in an RPG gacha game. Like, that's the primary driver, right? You're looking for that primary driver. So it might not work in, you know, say a puzzle game, but I think some of the concepts, like we're seeing Battle Pass being ubiquitously used, from Words with Friends to, you know, the standard Fortnite kind of gameplay. So I think there is a lot of flexibility. I think really it's fine to start at a position of like, well, what's kind of happening in our genre space right now? But I really encourage people to not be afraid to look into other genres and other monetization aspects and kind of pull them in and say, like, can we do something a little bit different than our competitors and monetize a little bit differently, and using live to kind of test that.
Okay, so a follow-up question for you there. You're saying, like, don't be afraid to look at other genres and like not just in your own niche, but I mean, to what extent should you also be creative then? Like, to what extent could you actually?
Well, I think
try and
it's
original?
fundamentally rooted in that creativity, right? Like that's a great place to start. So one of the core challenges that I've run into, and I don't know if our other panelists have, but nobody wants to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? So everybody's afraid to really start twisting dials on monetization because you're like, I am making X amount of money. I don't want that to go down. And so that's why I highly favor the live event structure as a way to test out new monetization elements. And I think that's where the creativity comes in, right? So I could say, and I'll just pick on Battle Pass because that's kind of the thing that everybody seems to be really hot about right now. Like it didn't hurt Words with Friends to throw a Battle Pass in, and call it the Word Pass and put the whole, that didn't hurt them at all. There's nothing to lose at that point. So I think it's creatively thinking about, well, this fits here. This doesn't subtract from our existing monetization structures. And it doesn't fundamentally undermine it. And we can run it one or two times, see if it's getting the data that we want, and then just kind of turn it off. So I think that's where you can like kind of tweak it and get creative there.
Okay, I saw Antanina nodding during that section.
Yeah, because like basically I wanted to say like, yeah, that's when you A/B test it, like I'm not sure if you should do it or not. But actually, like I was reading an article recently, and I like how they defined the monetization mechanics, right, or the models into like 4 big pieces, and those are like paid ads in terms of in-app advertising, right? Then in-app purchases and subscriptions, and basically they all kind of form this monetization strategy pie. And I think most of the games, they're all using the same models basically, but it just depends which part of the pie takes the biggest place, right? So for example, maybe for like hyper casual games, there will be more like app ads, right? And for some games, there will be more like in-app purchases or subscriptions, right? But then it just really depends like which part of the pie it will take. But I would say that the whole strategy or this whole pie is kind of like almost the same, I would say. And I think we're also like, we're playing different games, we're looking at each other, right? And so we're applying it to our games at least at that point. And so it just depends like what actually works more for you. But there is no like one fits all recipe or something like that. So it's more about like the combination of the things that work for your game, right? So it's kind of like my opinion on that.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll throw in a couple points. I think first, the A/B testing is super important, right? Especially if you've never done monetization. If you're free to play and you haven't integrated any subscriptions, you haven't done any in-app advertising, you got to do A/B testing, and you have to get feedback from your subscribers, because subscribers for different games and different genres are very different, right? And I think that sometimes they're going to resonate and sometimes they're not. And then the second point is really understand and make sure that the models and strategies that you integrate don't really significantly impact the user experience or the user journey. It should help it, right? It should complement it. So even if you do some gamification things, that drives monetization, I think those are really great. But if it truly is going to impact the way a subscriber or end user plays your game, then it's either going to frustrate them, or it's going to be, okay, cool, I can get new things if I watch this ad, or hey, I have new things if I subscribe to this battle pass. So just make sure that you don't impact or severely impact the user experience, because that's at the end what people stay for.
Yeah, I'll jump in as well, because I think you touched on impacts, and Daniel made a very important point as well. You don't want to impact your existing monetization. So while you're looking at both the impact on the user, you're also looking at the impact on your business as well.
And one final thing. So A/B tests has come up quite a bit, and this is something that, again, kind of really reared its head in an odd way on Star Wars, which was A/B testing worked fine for us in pre-launch, but once we got into launch, we found we actually could not A/B test monetization as effectively as we were able to prior to, largely because of Reddit. And people would get on there and be like, hey, I saw this ad and I got this thing. And what we found worked really well for us was we could A/B test certain arrangements of an ad, or we could show deep linked offers to groups of people. And then what would happen is people would just say like, well, I didn't get this one. How do I get this one? How do I find? That was about as far as we could go without it having, without it turning into potentially legal issues, right? Like he paid this and I paid this, and things with EA, that sort of stuff. So A/B testing, I think, is really, really great for a pre-launch, a soft launch sort of thing. But like I said, I found live operations, live events to be a better way to test monetization schemes, because then we could kind of put it out to everybody. The player contract was established that, hey, this was only going to run for a week or 2 weeks or however many days we wanted, that the specials that were associated with it, that the pricing that was associated with it, if we wanted to introduce kind of a new structure, like it was self-contained. And if it never came back, the worst we got on Reddit was like, oh man, I really wish this thing would come back. It was so great. It's like, yeah, of course it was so great. It's the best deal. It totally ate our lunch. So that's just my comment on A/B testing. I'm not trying to undermine anybody's feedback about A/B testing. I just, from having actually kind of gone through it, I just kind of wanted to put that like heads up to just kind of be aware that Reddit can be kind of harsh with A/B testing on monetization.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's a good point, especially like when your game is have a big user base, right? And so it's like everything is visible on the on Reddit. But at the same time, I'm a big fan of A/B test, and I think especially for live operations, you should like try to A/B test as much as possible, and it shouldn't like discourage you. Like if you're gonna see that on Reddit, I mean, you should think about it, right? How you're gonna address that and how you're gonna communicate it to players, what's happening, what's going on in the game. But at the same time, I think if you actually wisely choose the test group and the control group, right? So then I think you can overcome any like clash on Reddit that you may face. Yeah.
I was going to say something similar. It's about measuring the risks and having mitigation plans in place. And I think that also is one of my answers to, I think also live ops is the perfect environment for doing these tests. And the other alternative is actually just good planning. For example, I know it's a PC game, but when we took Eve from subscription only to free to play, the risk was massive, because why would subscribers continue to play when and pay when they don't have to, right? So that required a lot of planning, a lot of forethought, and a lot of mitigations and risks, and thinking about how to both communicate that and how to keep players engaged. So you can totally make these big changes with good planning.
And actually to what sorry, I'm gonna jump on again. Yeah, actually one more thought to what Daniel said is that before maybe pushing your feature as like permanent one or permanent monetization mechanics that you're going to use in the game, I agree that sometimes it's worth launching it as like a limited time live ops event, right, to test it. And you don't necessarily then need A/B tests. You can present it to all players, but for just a short or limited period of time. Yeah.
I was going to just jump in and throw in that take a look at what other games or products or services in your genre are doing. You're not going to be the first person to do something, likely. And there are other companies that have done it really well, and even competitors. So take a look at what they're doing. And if it's the first time that you're doing it, it's okay to learn from what other people are doing, because they've done it correctly and it resonates well with their subscribers, and it's not too big of a impact or change in strategy. So if you haven't done it before, take a look at, make sure you know what other people are doing, because they've already done the A/B testing for you.
Cool. Well, this is going to be a pretty easy panel for me. I ask one question and you guys are all over it. So great. But to kind of plug into something that's come up in this last section, like you talked a lot about live ops strategy, testing new monetization within live ops. But how does like your base monetization strategy work alongside a live ops strategy? Like, I guess, what are your expectations for live ops? Should they be adding, 10, 20, 30% to your base monetization? But also, how do you make sure that the two are working together and not potentially cannibalizing one another?
I think there's something there that is rooted in the philosophy of the studio. And I think that, so EA, much more aggressive about their expectations on return, right? Some of the indie studios I've worked at or smaller studios I've worked at, we were more concerned about retention and quote unquote the brand, right? And so there were opportunities for us to maybe leave some money on the table because we felt that, in the short term, because we felt that things were better in the long term. So I think that's fundamentally rooted in what is the core philosophy of the business you're running, who you're working for, and the type of game, right? I think some games are can be a bit more aggressive, and can expect higher returns from the events that they run. For me personally, I tend to operate more in I'm largely more concerned about retention and brand, because I feel like I can get a better conversion over 365 days. So for me, the thing that I look at when we put events together and when we put monetization together is, number one, do I see that committed player group, right? The people who are consistently engaged, spending, doing the things that we deem as like, yes, this is how you should play our game, right? That committed play group, do they engage with this? Do we see their spending patterns either stay the same or get better? Do we see new people coming into that? Do we see us crossing over, getting some of those free-to-play players that maybe were adverse to spending? Will they kind of convert and cross that line? Those are all positive things that I look for. Then there are also events that we put together where we're like, hey, actually, maybe we have to hit a number because we're coming to the end of the quarter or whatever, and we know that this really encourages our high value spenders to engage a little bit more aggressively. So I tend to play it by ear.
I was going to add, I think that's a very good point about studio philosophy. I think there's also the aspect of what do you see your lifespan of your game to be as well. Are you looking at a game where you expect the main lifespan to be a year, or are you looking at a game that's looking for 5 years? Because that can again adjust your live ops, how hard you go in terms of monetization and how aggressive you go with live ops.
Actually, when I say that, I think when we talk about the game economy, right? So this is something that maybe should be considered like at the beginning of the game when you're actually planning the whole economy, right? And how your probably monetization models will work. But once your game is live, I think monetization strategy is actually a part of your live ops strategy. At least to me, it works like that. And so whenever we're working on like the calendar or something, so it's, of course, we're also planning what we're going to do in terms of the monetization, right? So it kind of like goes hand in hand for me. So yeah.
Kind of why I do both. So
yeah,
it works really well to do. You're totally right. If you plan, it is just part of your entire strategy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of like, I would say, yeah, it's probably like an engagement strategy or monetization strategy, but in the end, it's all your live ops.
Cool. Okay, so how, like when you're thinking about the monetization strategy that you want for your game, like how do you think about it? And we've just talked a little bit about studio philosophy, and I imagine that's going to be a part of this, but how do you think about more aggressive monetization versus more user-friendly monetization? And I guess aggressive, I would be thinking of kind of very high-priced gacha and very like high revenue driving events based around, for example, pay to win.
I can agree that, it's if you try to define what is aggressive strategy, right? So I think it's easy synonym of pay to win or like paywall, but at the same time, it's just if you take more user-friendly approach, right? So it means that you need to provide another like grindable way for players to the same content, right? It can be maybe not the same like customization of the same content, right? But at the same time, the functionality, right, should be there and should be available for players. Otherwise, you're gonna go to like pay to win game, and so many players will complain that just kind of like, yeah, you kind of break the game balance too, So that's also the thing that you have to keep in mind. So I think like if you release a new item or something, you just need to make sure that there is like, okay, the way for spenders to get it, but there is also the way for other players to, instead of investing their funds, right, to invest their time, right, and invest I don't know, like playing matches or like staying online or watching ads and so on, right? So there is another way that they can get this item. Yeah.
So for me, I think there's a couple of aspects. One of them is, what does your audience accept? So what is your market, and what will they accept within that context as well? Because different demographics will monetize in different ways. And the second part, I think it also touches back on the genre question. There are definite genres which will accept and players will accept playing those genres and more aggressive systems, such as, trading card games or card collecting games. Hearthstone is a classic game where you really can't win, I don't think, without buying decks or investing some sort of money. But, other people might disagree with that, but I think there are definitely games out there that do that, and it's totally acceptable because that's within the genre and that's what players expect.
I also think that it's going to depend on whether you're a casual gamer or if you're super competitive, right? There's always going to be a broad range of people playing your game, whether you just go on once or twice a month, you're on a bus ride or in a car ride, or you're playing 3-4 times a day, or you're playing with your family or your friends, and you have a circle of people that you hang out with and play this game. So I think you have to make sure you understand who your users are, the segment that they fall into. And there are some people that are going to be willing to pay $10 a month. There are some people that are going to be willing to pay $20 for personalization or customization. And there are people who will watch ads all day to gain some, I don't know, gems or coins or top-ups or whatever. I think the two biggest questions that I try to answer when I introduce something new, whether it's monetization or a new feature, is it going to increase my user engagement, or is it going to decrease my user engagement? And you got to create KPIs or success goals around measurements on how successful this particular feature or monetization strategy has resulted in. So one is it going to increase your user engagement or detract from it? And certainly I think you need to go back and get feedback. So going back to the Reddits of the world and sending out maybe post integration surveys. Hey, how did you like this? Or what did you like about it? Or what didn't you like about it? People are not going to be shy about giving you feedback, whether they like it or not. And so you got to listen to the data for sure.
And I think you actually mentioned a very important point here, a very good point, is that, when you actually apply your monetization strategy, it's not only because you want to like earn revenue, right, to increase your revenue, but it's also about the engagement, because you want your players to become more loyal, right, and to stay in the game and to play. So that comes like the KPIs like retention that Daniel mentioned, right, and then as Jonathan mentioned, that engagement becomes number one then. So it actually, everything comes to work together. Yeah.
Cool. So I mean, with this in mind, I guess it's interesting, and we mentioned it earlier, how the Battle Pass has become so kind of central to so many different games. I guess because it fulfills this dual purpose of usually having some kind of VIP tier for monetization, but also being a great retention mechanic. So how do we see the Battle Pass evolving over the course of the next insert period of time here? Like how do we think it's going to change? Because I think we're still quite early in the cycle of this mechanism. Where do you see innovation coming from?
So this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, as I actually believe the Battle Pass is a great jumping off point for monetization. I think it's still in its infancy. I think the current Battle Pass structure as it stands is ripe for experimentation and and being creative. And there's stuff that I'm working on that I hope will lean into that. I'm not going to get too deeply into that, nothing personal. But I also believe that one of the reasons why the Battle Pass works so well is because in games that don't have clear goal formation, it is beautifully perfect goal formation. It's visible, it's trackable, it's related to the things that people are doing anyway. And it says, hey, if I don't know what to do right now, or if I don't have a clear picture of what I'm trying to get right now, I can always look at this track of rewards and say, even if I don't pay, I still can say, well, I'm only this far away, right? That's like in games. Yeah, there are people who can create their own goals, and they love a lot of different types of games. I think Minecraft is a great example of a space where people who can create their own goals and feel satisfied by chasing their own goals can exist. But a good number of people don't have that innate satisfaction and can spend a lot of time with their own goals. So I really think Battle Pass is actually underutilized, not from the position of being integrated in a lot of games. I think it's hyper utilized in that way, but I think it's underutilized in like what it can be tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's under optimized at the moment, with a lot of cut and paste. It worked, so therefore I must just do the same thing. I also won't go into too many details because I'm also hoping to hit on some of those magic magic parts of what hasn't been done yet. That said, I think there are some things that are very good about battle passes and some things that are a downside. And one of the areas I think that needs to be fixed, and I haven't looked at the data for probably about 18 months, but when I was initially looking at some of the data, certainly from PC markets, we were seeing massive spikes, it was just to be expected, right? You see a revenue spike when you launch your pass and it goes quiet, and then you see more spikes towards the end. And I think for games that focus only on a battle pass system, there's a risk of revenue between the start and the end of the season. So I think my thoughts would be there'll be some changes into the way to flatten revenue out, and that's where subscriptions are really good, right? You've got this continual revenue cycle every month or whatever your period of subscription recurrence is. So that's somewhere I think maybe we'll see some optimization.
I think with subscriptions and battle passes, it really depends on what comes along with it. Is what you're providing with the subscription or battle pass valuable to the subscribers, and how many subscribers are they relevant to? If you have a subscription that's $1.99 a month, your range of targets are probably pretty high. If you have a subscription that's $19.99 a month, you're probably going to see a couple people take it, but it really depends on what comes along with each level of subscription or your battle pass. Is it valuable to them? And you're going to see that sometimes when you create a subscription, it's not going to resonate because the content may not be so exciting, or the ability, if it takes me a week to reach the level of signing up for a battle pass or a subscription, and it cost me $10, I may say, you know what, I'm just going to go play the game and get to that level in a week. So I really depends on what comes along with those subscriptions and battle passes that will resonate. And you got to tweak it along the way, because sometimes you're going to release something that is going to be a miss.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that is that, to me, it's a battle pass is actually a perfect example of like combination of both monetization and engagement, right? Because I think battle pass engage players and provides that like a goal, as Daniel mentioned, as nothing else in your game. And then from the live perspective, right? So we all understand that battle pass is like, it's the total value for money. So you actually get like almost everything that you pay by the end of the battle pass if you reach it, right? So you almost get everything back, or sometimes even more, right? And so from the live perspective, I think it's important to plan your events in the way that first make sure that players come back the next season, right, and subscribe again. So that kind of like comes back to subscriptions, or basically providing the value or displaying the value again. And second is then to make sure that, basically by the end of the, when they reach the battle pass, right? So there is something else going on that they can also stay engaged and not just churn, right? And wait for another thing to come. And then also make sure that, these balances of like, when they actually spend and gain, right? So like sinking sources, I would say, right? So they're staying balanced. So I think that's important for, especially for the live ops teams to keep in mind. And that's definitely something that, is always at the back of my mind when we're working on the new season. So yeah.
Cool. I will say I actually did a presentation quite recently on the topic of battle passes, and I specifically took inspiration from the theming behind the seasons in Call of Duty Mobile, because I think that differentiation of how you treat each season in terms just really makes it like so unique and makes sure that you remain engaged and stick around at least to see what's coming next season.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'll also add one last comment. A lot of games are now allowing you to try before you buy, and I think that's a really good method, because people don't want to commit to something. I mean, we all know that when you download something onto your mobile phone or device, it could stay there for less than 24 hours, or it could stay there for a week, or it could get buried under the other hundreds of other apps on your device. So a lot of times games are now trying to let you use it, or even apps will let you use it for a week at no costs. So I think try before you buy is kind of works in the restaurant industry, and I think it works really well in the gaming and app industry as well. The other thing is that you can now play some games without even downloading it, which I think is kind of nice also, because you're not so committed. I don't have to waste the space on my device. I can play it for a couple minutes or an hour before I actually decide to go download it. So I think those two strategies are kind of interesting and work pretty well too.
Really cool. We had a question from the audience during that as well. So what are some examples of casual RPG and simulation games that implemented Battle Pass effectively? Daniel already mentioned Homescapes, Gardenscapes, and Words with Friends too. Does anyone have anything to add to the list while we're at it?
For casual games, I think there were like, very good examples. And in fact, I've purchased like a few Gardenscapes battle passes, and they also utilize this like try for free model that kind of caught my eye as well. So yeah, I think that was actually, at first I was very skeptical, but actually see like it's probably working. So yeah, it looks like they very good examples. One of them also like Empires and Puzzles, I think. That's the game also, like I pretty much like their battle pass. Yeah.
Cool. Incidentally, we've got about 5 minutes left. We still have questions that we can talk through. Like I still have a bunch of questions. But if anyone from the audience has something they particularly want answered, please throw it in the chat. We'll try and take it. So in addition to Battle Pass, we've kind of touched on the subject of subscription here and there. What do you see then as like the future challenges or opportunities within a subscription model?
So it's just something that Jonathan, I think, mentioned earlier. I actually think it's been mentioned quite a bit on this panel, which is like value, right? Like at the end of the day, everything that you're doing is rooted in the same core problem, whether it's subscriptions, battle pass, selling a pack, whatever it is. Do you understand your audience, and are you providing them enough value that it doesn't feel like you're nickeling and diming them to death, right? Like to your point, like you could put a $20 subscription on there, and if it has $50 worth of goods, you're probably going to get a pretty good engagement on that, because it would become a no-brainer for people to go like, if you are not buying this, you are just being left behind, right? So to me, the idea of like, oh, is a subscription the right thing, or is it this or that or whatever? To me, that's a non-question, because the real question is, Do you know who your audience is? Do you know what their tolerances are? Do you know what your value is? And can you provide whatever you're thinking of in a way that your audience perceives it as value? And look, the easiest way to do this is just look at the data. Hey, how many people are buying this? How many people are not buying it? What's happening with the people who do buy it? Like there's a lot of raw data questions that you can, with a good analyst, you can dig into and just see, is it resonating?
And I'd like to add that you'll probably, sorry, Jonathan, that you'll probably want to look like beyond the Battle Pass subscriptions, right? Because again, you'll probably want to look at something that would combine both monetization and engagement, So some games like in Asian market, right? So for example, they use the subscription models where you actually collect your soft currency, right, over a period of time. And that's what makes you log into the game every day, right? So look at different options that you can use in your game, not necessarily the Battle Pass, but they can be something else that you can provide these subscriptions for.
Yeah, I think things like virtual currency or gems would be can translate into real currency in the long game. And then I also think the app stores have made it somewhat a little bit easier to try to move to subscriptions. If you see someone that's coming in that's been around for 6 months, 12 months more, but they've not done a subscription, you got to figure out why. They're there and they're playing and they're active. Try to see how to get them to move to a subscription, because ultimately it'll be a better user experience for them and some type of revenue for you.
All right, we've got maybe a minute and a half left. I'm going to try and cram in one question.
Less than that, I'm afraid. It's I wrote that 2 minutes ago.
Sweeps in.
I have to sweep in, and I'm going to have some time to wrap up before the thing.
All right, fair enough.
No, but guys, that was really, really exciting. Really, really interesting stuff. And I think, from my point of view, the one thing I'd add to what you've said is, predictability. Or no, predictability is good, but for repeating the same things time and time again, following patterns can get very tedious very quickly. And I always end up getting people to think about the TV show Columbo. The reason I think that is because there's method in my madness. So 1970s detective show Columbo it was a whodunit where you saw who did it at the beginning, but you still watched it because you're watching the detective, you're watching what Columbo does, and you're waiting for the moment 5 minutes before the end when he says the immortal line, "Just one more thing," and then he's going to reveal not how who did it, because we know that, but he's going to reveal how he solved it. The reason this is such an important analogy for me for game and live ops and running offers of subscriptions is the audience is with you. The audience is following. They're filling in the gaps. They're filling in their own expectations. And then when you reveal the thing that you're going to do next, they are delighted because they're either surprised or you've managed to make them feel clever.
That's
and
true.
I think if you look at the way that you build
super
live
angry.
operations, no, you should never be in a situation where they're ever super angry. Quite the opposite.
That'd be great, Oscar. If you know the secret sauce to that.
I'm not saying I've ever got it right. But I think that's the mindset I always bring when I'm running kind of live operations, and particularly when I'm thinking about subscriptions and battle passes and what they're trying to bring in terms of monetization is, where is the predictable surprise? And I think, if you don't have a level of predictability, the offers, the promotions, the structures can fall flat. And if you don't have surprise, everything can also fall flat. So it's this. In fact, I'd almost argue balance is a terrible thing too, but that's another debate. We're not even going to. We haven't got time for me to go into even that. Guys, I thank you so much. I always love to try to ask questions at the end, but Nick has done such a good job. There's nothing left for me to ask. So, guys, thank you so much. And I have, unfortunately, to bring the monetization part of this evening, of today, to a close. So, thank you all for participating in that panel.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who's been speaking on the Monetizer track.